A 93-year-old soldier faced ridicule from a gang, but a single phone call turned the tables and unearthed a past that left everyone speechless. The diner's bell chimed as the gang swaggered in, leather jackets gleaming under flickering fluorescent lights. Jack Morgan glanced up briefly, his wrinkled face impassive, but his hands tightened around his coffee mug. "Hey, Grandpa!" Fang barked, slamming a hand on Jack's table. The mug rattled, but Jack didn't flinch. "You deaf?" another biker sneered. "He's talking to you." Jack sighed, glancing at the clock. "It's 5:15, he muttered, more to himself than to them. "Guess it starts earlier these days." Fang frowned, confused. "What starts?" Jack met his gaze with piercing blue eyes. "Trouble." For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Fang laughed, breaking the tension, and leaned closer. "You're all alone, old man. Nobody's coming to save you." Jack's lips curled into the faintest smile. "That's what they always think." The bikers chuckled, their laughter loud and obnoxious as they pulled up chairs and surrounded Jack. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply as if preparing for something monumental. "Last chance," Jack murmured softly, almost inaudibly. "Walk away." Fang sneered. "Or what?" Jack's gaze sharpened. "Or you'll wish you had." Jack stepped into his modest home, his breath heavy but steady. He locked the door behind him and turned the deadbolt with deliberate slowness, his hands steady despite the chaos at the diner. The house was silent, except for the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Faded photographs lined the walls. A younger Jack in uniform, medals pinned to his chest, standing beside a group of men whose faces radiated the same steely determination. Jack walked to a wooden desk in the corner of the living room. He opened a drawer, pulling out a black rotary phone covered in a thin layer of dust. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the dial. Memories flooded back. Missions, whispers in the dark, and a promise he'd made long ago to never use this line again. But this wasn't just about him. This was about the town. About the neighbors who still left pies on his doorstep, who greeted him with kindness every morning. With a resolute nod, he turned the dial. The call connected after a single ring. "This is Falcon," came a gruff voice on the other end. The voice was unmistakable. Marcus Kane, his old commander. Jack swallowed hard. "Morgan here. It's time." A pause. Then, Marcus's voice grew sharper. "Code Falcon?" Jack's response was simple but laced with the weight of the past. Code Falcon. Meanwhile, back at the diner, the bikers celebrated their dominance. Fang lounged in a booth, flipping through a worn deck of cards. The others laughed raucously, recounting the encounter with Jack. "Can you believe that old fool?" one biker jeered, slamming his beer bottle on the table. Fang smirked. "Guy thinks he's some kind of tough guy. Maybe we pay him a little visit tomorrow, see how much fight he's really got left. Or if he's still breathing," another added with a cruel grin. Fang leaned back, his boots propped on the table. "Nah, guys like him don't need a beating. They just need a reminder that their time is over." By dawn, the wheels were already in motion. A sleek black SUV pulled up outside a remote farm in Montana. A wiry man in his 70s, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, stepped out of the barn, a shotgun slung over his shoulder. His name was Joe Sparrow Fletcher, once the team's sniper, now a retired rancher. The SUV window rolled down, revealing Marcus Kane. "Sparrow, we've got a situation. Morgan called in Code Falcon." Joe froze, his grip tightening on the shotgun. He hadn't heard those words in decades. His sharp eyes scanned Marcus's face. He wouldn't call unless it was real. Marcus nodded grimly. He wouldn't. Joe exhaled deeply. "Let me grab my gear." Jack spent the morning preparing. He moved with purpose, boarding up windows and clearing the clutter from his living room to create open space. His movements were deliberate, practiced. As he finished, the faint sound of a motorcycle engine rumbled in the distance. Jack peered out the window, his jaw tightening. The gang was coming, but Jack wasn't afraid. He sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out an old cigar box and opened it. Inside were keepsakes from his military days, a faded patch, a worn photograph of his unit, and a handgun, pristine and well-maintained. He loaded it carefully, his expression unreadable. The engines grew louder. Jack leaned back in his chair, waiting. The ticking clock was the only sound in the house now. Fang led the group of bikers down Jack's quiet street, their roaring engines cutting through the morning air. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, their faces pale with fear. They stopped in front of Jack's house, dismounting with cocky grins. Fang cracked his knuckles and motioned for the others to follow him. They didn't knock. They kicked the door in. The house was empty, too empty. Jack was nowhere in sight. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances as they stepped inside. "Where is he?" one muttered. Suddenly, the grandfather clock chimed. Its deep, resonant tone echoed through the house. Then, a voice came from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come." The bikers spun around, searching for the source, but Jack remained hidden. "Show yourself, old man," Fang bellowed, pulling a knife from his belt. Jack's voice carried a chilling calm. "You boys think you run this town, but you've never faced someone like me." The sound of glass shattering upstairs drew their attention. Fang gestured for two bikers to investigate. As they climbed the creaking stairs, the tension in the room thickened. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from above, followed by a heavy thud. Fang's confidence faltered. "What the hell?" Jack stepping into the doorway, a shadowy figure holding his loaded handgun. His voice is cold, unyielding. "Leave while you can. This is your only warning." Fang's bravado wavered as Jack's silhouette filled the doorway. The dim light from the street lamp outside cast long shadows, making the old soldier appear larger than life. His handgun, steady in his grip, was pointed directly at Fang. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Fang said, forcing a smirk, but his voice betrayed him, shaking just enough to expose his unease. Jack's cold eyes didn't blink. "You don't want to test me. Not today." "Yeah?" Fang sneered, stepping forward. "And what's an old man like you gonna—" Before he could finish, a sharp whistle pierced the air. It came from behind the gang. Fang froze. The bikers turned, startled, to see three figures standing in the shadows outside the house. One of them, a tall, wiry man, held a crossbow aimed directly at the group. "You were saying?" Jack asked, his voice calm and cutting. The three figures stepped forward into the light. Joe, Sparrow, Fletcher, still holding the crossbow, gave a wry grin. Beside him was a burly, broad-shouldered man in his early 70s. Frank Hammer Doyle, the team's demolitions expert. The third figure was a woman, her gray hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. This was Lila Hawk Thompson, their intelligence specialist and Jack's closest confidant. Marcus Kane, the team's leader, appeared moments later, holding a tablet displaying a tactical map. "Gentlemen and lady, we've got a situation to clean up." The bikers exchanged confused glances. Fang took a step forward, trying to reassert his dominance. "What is this? Some retirement home reunion? You think I'm scared of a bunch of—" Marcus cut him off. "Let me stop you right there. What you should be scared of is the fact that you're outnumbered, outgunned, and completely unprepared." Lila spoke up, her voice sharp and authoritative. "We know who you are, Fang, and we know what you've been running through this town." Fang's face darkened, but he tried to play it off. "I don't know what you're talking about, Grandma." Joe chuckled. "Oh, you'll figure it out soon enough." Jack's team wasted no time. While the bikers regrouped outside, arguing amongst themselves, the old soldiers fortified the house and set traps. Years of military experience came flooding back as they worked together seamlessly, their movements efficient and precise. "Tripwire here," Joe said, setting up a thin line across the back porch. "Should slow 'em down." Frank carefully placed small charges in strategic spots. "Non-lethal, but they'll wish it was." Inside, Lila reviewed intercepted communications from the gang's burner phones. "This isn't just a gang of thugs," she said, her tone grave. "They're running weapons. High-grade stuff. Somebody bigger is funding them." Jack nodded. "Makes sense. Their leader's too organized for a small-time operation." Marcus looked at the group. "We take out the bikers, and we take out their supply chain. But we need Fang alive. He knows who's pulling the strings." Night had fully fallen, and the house was eerily quiet. Jack sat by the front window, his handgun resting on the table. Outside, the sound of engines revving filled the air. The bikers were making their move. "They're coming," Jack said, his voice steady. The team took their positions. Joe climbed into the attic, crossbow in hand, while Frank waited in the basement near the back entrance. Marcus and Lila stayed in the living room, rifles ready. The first biker charged the front door, a crowbar raised. The moment his foot hit the porch, a tripwire snapped, and a loud bang sent him flying backward. He landed in the yard, groaning. Another biker tried the side window, only to find himself tangled in razor-sharp wire. His screams echoed through the night. Inside, Frank grinned as the sound of chaos reached his ears. Just like old times. From the street, Fang watched his men fall one by one. He clenched his fists, seething with rage. This was supposed to be an easy takeover, a small-town intimidation job. He hadn't expected a fight, let alone a battle against a team of hardened operatives. "Enough!" Fang roared, grabbing a shotgun from his bike. "We're ending this now!" He stormed toward the house, his remaining men following reluctantly. But as they approached, the lights in the house flickered off, plunging everything into darkness. From the shadows, Jack's voice rang out, "You've already lost." Inside the house, Lila had hacked into the gang's communication network. She intercepted a message from an unknown number. "ETA, 30 minutes. Secure the shipment." "Jack," she said, urgency in her tone. "They're expecting reinforcements. Whoever's funding them is sending backup." Jack nodded grimly. "We'll handle it. First, we take down Fang." As the bikers closed in, Jack and his team executed their plan. Smoke grenades filled the yard, disorienting the gang. Joe picked them off one by one with tranquilizer darts, while Frank's traps continued to wreak havoc. Inside the house, Jack prepared for his final confrontation with Fang. Fang burst through the front door, his shotgun at the ready. He found Jack waiting for him in the living room, seated calmly in a chair. "You've caused a lot of trouble," Fang snarled, aiming the shotgun at Jack. "Time to end it." Jack didn't move. "You've got two choices. Drop the gun and walk away, or stay and face the consequences." Fang laughed. "What consequences? You're just one man." Jack's calm expression didn't change. "Am I?" Before Fang could react, Marcus appeared behind him, his rifle pressed against Fang's back. "Drop it!" Fang froze, the fight draining from his face. He dropped the shotgun with a loud clatter. As Fang stood there, his hands raised, Jack stepped forward. "Who's funding you?" he demanded. Fang hesitated, then sneered. "You have no idea what you've just stepped into." Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles shattered the quiet. Lila's voice came over the radio. "Jack, we've got company. Big company." Jack turned to Marcus, his face set in determination. "Looks like we're just getting started." Fang was dragged into the basement, bound and fuming, as Jack and Marcus stood over him. The dim light cast long shadows across the room, making Fang's sneer look even more menacing. Blood trickled from his temple, but his cocky demeanor remained intact. "You're wasting your time, old man," Fang spat. "You think you've won, but you don't even know what you're dealing with." Jack leaned in close, his voice low and dangerous. "Then why don't you enlighten us?" Fang smirked, but his silence was interrupted by Lila's voice crackling through the radio. "Jack, I've got something. Fang's phone has been pinging to a secure server. The encryption is advanced, but I managed to trace it back to a company, Griffin Industries." Marcus's expression darkened. "Griffin Industries? They're a private military contractor. If they're involved, this is bigger than we thought." Jack's jaw tightened. He turned back to Fang. "Why is Griffin funding you? What's in it for them?" Fang chuckled, his teeth stained with blood. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Upstairs, Lila worked feverishly on her laptop, monitoring intercepted messages from the gang's reinforcements. One message stood out. "Secure the package at all costs. Extraction in 45 minutes." "Package?" Lila muttered, her brow furrowing. She relayed the information to the team. "They're not just here for revenge," Marcus said. There's something they're protecting. Jack nodded. It's not just about this town. It's about whatever they brought here. We need to find that package before they do. Meanwhile, word spread quickly through the small town about the escalating conflict. Residents who had cowered in fear for weeks began to stir. People like Bill, the grizzled mechanic, and Sarah, the feisty diner owner, decided they'd had enough. Sarah grabbed her father's old hunting rifle while Bill rallied a small group of locals to block the streets with tractors and trucks. "If these guys want to take our town," Bill said, "they're going to have to go through us." The town's sudden resistance gave Jack's team a glimmer of hope. Lila radioed Jack. "We've got backup, Jack. The townsfolk are stepping up." Jack allowed himself a rare smile. "Good. We're going to need all the help we can get." Jack and Marcus devised a plan to locate the mysterious package while Joe and Frank fortified the house for the incoming mercenaries. Jack's gut told him the shipment would be hidden in plain sight, somewhere the bikers had already secured as their base. "The diner," Jack said. "It's their hub. If the package is here, that's where it'll be." Under the cover of darkness, Jack and Marcus slipped through the town, using alleys and side streets to avoid patrols. At the diner, they found 2 mercenaries standing guard near the back entrance. "Silent or loud?" Marcus asked, his knife glinting in the moonlight. "Silent," Jack replied, his voice steady. Moments later, the guards lay unconscious in the alley as Jack and Marcus slipped inside. The air was thick with tension as they searched the kitchen, storage rooms, and basement. Finally, Marcus spotted a locked steel crate hidden under a tarp. "This has to be it." Jack inspected it carefully, noting the Griffin Industries logo stenciled on the side. "Let's move. Whatever's in here, it's important enough to send an army after." Back at the house, Joe and Frank kept watch as the mercenaries began their approach. Floodlights lit up the street, and the sound of heavy boots echoed in the distance. "They're probing us," Joe said, watching through his scope, trying to find a weak spot. Frank grinned, his hands on a detonator. "Let 'em try. I've got a few surprises waiting." Lila's voice came over the radio. "Jack, you'd better get back here fast. They're closing in." Jack and Marcus returned to the house, the crate in tow. As they secured it in the basement, Lila connected her laptop to a hidden port on the crate. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she bypassed the encryption. "What's in there?" Marcus asked. Lila's face paled as the contents were revealed. Blueprints for experimental weaponry, prototypes for advanced drones, and files labeled Project Tempest. "This isn't just a gang operation," Lila said, her voice trembling. "Griffin's using this town as a testing ground. They're planning something big." Before anyone could respond, the sound of an explosion rocked the house. The mercenaries had launched their first assault, and the walls shuddered under the impact. Jack grabbed his rifle, his voice calm but firm. "Everyone to your positions. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about stopping whatever they're planning." The team scattered, taking their places as the mercenaries advanced. Jack paused for a moment, his gaze falling on the Griffin logo on the crate. "This ends tonight," he said softly. The first explosion rattled the house, sending dust and debris raining from the ceiling. Jack remained steady, his hands gripping his rifle like a lifeline. The others moved into position with the practiced precision of soldiers who had done this 1,000 times before, but this time was different. They weren't fighting for medals or glory, they were fighting for survival. Lila's voice broke through the tension. "They've got drones. 2, maybe 3. I can jam them temporarily, but we're on borrowed time." "Do it," Jack ordered, his tone clipped. "Joe, take high ground and watch for snipers. Frank, you're on crowd control. Marcus, cover the back entrance. Lila, stay on the crate. If they take it, we're done." Everyone nodded, falling into place as the sound of boots and engines grew louder outside. Through his scope, Joe Sparrow Fletcher spotted movement. A small squad of mercenaries advanced along the tree line, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. He inhaled slowly, steadying his aim, and fired. The lead soldier dropped silently, and the others scattered for cover. "They're testing us," Joe muttered over the radio, "sending in small teams to feel us out." Frank grinned as he crouched behind the front door, his detonator in hand. Well, let's give 'em a welcome they won't forget. A second wave charged toward the house, this time with more firepower. As they crossed the yard, Frank triggered a series of small charges hidden along the fence line. The explosions lit up the night, sending soldiers diving for cover. From his vantage point upstairs, Joe picked off the survivors one by one. "They're falling back," he reported. "For now." A faint buzzing sound cut through the night air, growing louder by the second. Lila's fingers flew across her keyboard as the first drone appeared, its camera scanning the house. "Got it," she said, jamming the signal and sending the drone spiraling into a nearby tree. "But there's more coming. They're using these to map our defenses." A second drone appeared, followed by a third, each more advanced than the last. One managed to evade her jamming device, firing a small missile that struck the side of the house. The explosion rocked the foundation, leaving a gaping hole in the living room wall. Marcus cursed. "They're trying to blow us out." Jack grabbed his radio. "Marcus, focus on stopping those drones. Joe, keep an eye on the tree line. Frank, we're going to need something bigger if they breach." Frank smirked, pulling out a satchel of C4. "Bigger? I can do that." As the mercenaries closed in, a convoy of pickup trucks and farm equipment roared down the street. Bill, the mechanic, led the charge, his truck outfitted with makeshift armor and mounted floodlights. Townsfolk leaned out of the vehicles with hunting rifles and shotguns, firing at the advancing mercenaries. The unexpected resistance threw the attackers off balance. They scrambled to regroup, but the townspeople were relentless, using their knowledge of the terrain to ambush and outmaneuver the heavily armed soldiers. "Looks like the cavalry's here," Marcus said with a grin as he fired at an approaching drone. "Keep them covered," Jack replied. "They'll buy us time, but we've got to end this." In the chaos, Fang managed to free himself from his bindings. He slipped through the basement window and disappeared into the night. By the time anyone noticed he was gone, he was already halfway to the mercenaries' staging area. When Fang reached the lead SUV, he barked orders at the commander. "The crate is in the house. If you want it, you're going to have to take it now." The commander, a cold-eyed man named Richter, nodded. "We're not leaving without it." Fang sneered. "And I want that old man's head." The mercenaries regrouped for a final push, this time using armored vehicles to breach the house. Frank detonated his remaining charges, creating a fiery barrier, but the attackers pressed forward relentlessly. Inside, Lila worked to encrypt the files from the crate, determined to uncover the full extent of Griffin's plans. "Almost there," she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. "Just need a few more minutes." Jack and Marcus held the ground floor, firing at anything that moved. Joe provided cover from above, but the sheer number of attackers was overwhelming. "They're breaking through!" Marcus shouted as a mercenary kicked down the back door. Jack swung around, taking the man down with a single shot. "Hold the line!" he yelled. "We can't let them take the crate!" As the attackers breached the living room, Frank made a desperate decision. Grabbing the last of his explosives, he ran toward the advancing soldiers. "Frank, no!" Marcus shouted, but it was too late. Frank triggered the explosives, taking out the lead vehicle and scattering the mercenaries. The blast sent shockwaves through the house, but it bought the team precious time. With the mercenaries momentarily pushed back, Lila finally cracked the encryption on the crate. Her face paled as she read the files. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They're building an army, autonomous drones, AI-controlled weaponry. Griffin isn't just testing. They're planning a global takeover." Jack's expression hardened. "Then this isn't just about this town anymore. We have to stop them, here and now." The mercenaries regrouped for one last assault, but this time the townsfolk joined Jack and his team in defending the house. Together, they fought with everything they had, turning the tide of the battle. As dawn broke over the battered town, the surviving mercenaries retreated, leaving behind their wounded and their shattered vehicles. But Fang was nowhere to be found. Jack stood in the ruins of his living room, staring at the Griffin logo on the now empty crate. "This isn't over," he said grimly. From the distance, a black helicopter rose into the sky, carrying Fang and Richter to safety. As it disappeared over the horizon, Jack clenched his fists. "We stopped them today," he said, "but they'll be back." The battle was over, but the scars were fresh. Smoke still rose from the charred remains of vehicles, and the air smelled of burnt wood and gunpowder. The townsfolk moved cautiously, helping the wounded and gathering what remained of their supplies. Despite the quiet, a heavy tension lingered, as though everyone knew the fight was far from over. Jack stood outside the wrecked house, watching the sunrise with a grim expression. His team gathered around him, battered but alive. "They'll regroup," Marcus said, his voice low. "Fang knows we have the intel now. Griffin won't let this go unanswered." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Then we need to hit them before they hit us." Lila called out from inside the house. "Jack, you need to see this." The team followed her into the basement, where her laptop displayed a decrypted file labeled Project Tempest, Operational Nodes. The document revealed a network of Griffin-controlled facilities spread across the country, each developing advanced military technologies. "Here," Lila said, pointing to a location marked in red. "This is their main hub. If we can get there, we might be able to shut the entire operation down." Joe whistled. "And I thought tonight was bad. This place will be crawling with mercenaries." "It's worse than that," Lila added, her voice grim. "They've developed an autonomous AI command system. If this goes live, Griffin could launch drone strikes anywhere in the world. No human oversight, no accountability." Jack's jaw tightened. "We can't let that happen." Before they could plan their next move, a knock came at the door. The team froze, weapons drawn, until Marcus cautiously opened it to reveal Bill and Sarah, flanked by a group of armed townsfolk. "We heard what you did for us," Bill said, his voice firm, "and we're not letting you fight this alone." Jack's eyes softened as he took in the group, their faces a mix of determination and fear. "This isn't your fight," he said gently. "These people are dangerous." Sarah stepped forward, holding her rifle with steady hands. "They made it our fight when they came to our town. What do you need us to do?" Miles away, Fang sat in the back of a black helicopter, his face bruised but triumphant. Across from him, Richter scrolled through the same files Lila had decrypted. "This town cost us more than we expected," Richter said coldly. "Morgan and his team are a bigger problem than we anticipated." Fang sneered. "They won't be for long. I know how they think. They'll come for us, and when they do, we'll be ready." Richter nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We'll double the defenses at the hub and deploy the prototypes. Let them come. Griffin doesn't lose." Back in the town, Jack's team and the townsfolk worked tirelessly to prepare for the next battle. Weapons were cleaned and repaired. Vehicles were reinforced with steel plating, and supplies were stockpiled. Lila spent hours refining a plan to infiltrate the Griffin hub. "It's not just about brute force," she said. "We need to disable their systems from the inside. Without the AI network, their entire operation will collapse." Marcus crossed his arms. "And getting in will be the hard part. What about the drones?" Lila smiled faintly. "I've been working on that. If I can upload a counter-program into their system, I can turn their drones against them." Joe raised an eyebrow. "And what happens if you can't?" Lila's expression hardened. "Then we hope Jack has enough firepower to get us out." As they finalized their plans, one of the townsfolk approached Jack. It was a young man named Tommy, who had helped with the initial resistance. "I need to talk to you," Tommy said nervously, "about Fang." Jack's gaze sharpened. "What about him?" Tommy hesitated, then spoke quickly. "Before all this started, I helped him. I didn't know what he was planning, but I gave him access to the town's old tunnels. He said he just needed a place to hide some supplies." Jack's stomach sank. "You're telling me there's a way into this town we haven't secured?" Tommy nodded, his face pale. "I didn't mean for this to happen, I swear." Jack turned to Marcus. "We need to find those tunnels, now." As night fell, Jack's team discovered the tunnels, hidden beneath an old barn on the edge of town. They were lined with crates marked with the Griffin logo, filled with weapons and supplies. "They were planning to stay here for the long haul," Marcus said grimly. Jack inspected the crates, his mind racing. "We'll use these against them. If Griffin wants to play dirty, we'll beat them at their own game." Lila's voice crackled over the radio. "Jack, we've got a problem. Griffin reinforcements are less than an hour away. Jack's expression hardened. Then we move now. The team loaded the stolen supplies into their trucks, ready to take the fight to Griffin's main hub. The townsfolk stood beside them, armed and determined. Jack addressed the group, his voice steady. This isn't just about this town anymore. This is about stopping something that could destroy everything we care about. If you want to stay behind, I'll understand. But if you're coming, there's no turning back. Not a single person stepped away. As the convoy rolled out of the town, a pair of Griffin drones hovered in the distance, their cameras fixed on the group. Fang's voice came over the radio, taunting them. "Coming to me, old man? Good. I've been waiting." The convoy rolled through the barren landscape, the hum of engines cutting through the silence. Jack sat in the lead truck, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The Griffin Industries hub loomed in the distance, a sprawling complex of steel and glass surrounded by high fences and patrolled by armed guards. "We're heading into the lion's den," Marcus muttered from the passenger seat. Jack didn't respond immediately. His gaze was distant, his mind calculating every possible scenario. "Then let's make sure we take the lion's head." The team parked the convoy a mile from the Griffin facility, hidden behind a rocky outcrop. Lila crouched over her laptop, setting up a jammer to disable Griffin's perimeter sensors. "Give me a minute," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "They'll never see us coming." Joe, perched nearby with his sniper rifle, scanned the area. Guards on the northeast corner, 2 by the main gate, drones in the air. Frank checked the explosives strapped to his chest. "I'll handle the gate. Once we're in, it's all hands on deck." Lila's voice broke through the tension. "We're good. Perimeter is blind for now. Move fast." Jack motioned for the group to advance. The team split into 2 units. Marcus and Frank would breach the gate while Jack, Lila, and Joe circled to the back. Frank approached the gate under the cover of darkness, planting small charges along the hinges. "This'll open it up nice and wide," he whispered with a grin. As the charges detonated, the gate crumpled inward with a deafening crash. Guards rushed to the scene, only to be met by Marcus's precise rifle fire. The path was clear, but the alarm had been triggered. "They know we're here," Lila's voice came over the radio. "Good," Jack replied. "Let them come." While the guards scrambled to contain the breach, Jack's team infiltrated the main building. The interior was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Lila led the way, her laptop hooked into Griffin's network. "This way," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "The control center is on the top floor." As they moved through the halls, the sound of boots echoed behind them. Joe dropped back, his sniper rifle trained on the corner. The first guard appeared, only to fall silently to the floor. "Keep moving," Joe said, his voice calm. They reached an elevator, and Lila worked her magic, bypassing the lock. As the doors slid open, Jack felt a pang of unease. This was too easy. The elevator opened to the control center, a room lined with monitors displaying Griffin's projects. But instead of finding empty desks and computers, they were greeted by Fang and a dozen heavily armed mercenaries. "Took you long enough?" Fang said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Jack stepped forward, his gun aimed directly at Fang. "It's over. You've lost." Fang laughed. "You really think you've won? You're in the heart of Griffin's operation. This place is a fortress, and I'm the one holding the keys." As if on cue, the doors slammed shut behind them. Red lights bathed the room as an automated voice announced, "Facility lockdown initiated." Fang's smile widened. "Welcome to your tomb, old man." The team sprang into action, taking cover as the mercenaries opened fire. Jack and Marcus returned fire, while Lila worked frantically to disable the lockdown. "I need 5 minutes," she shouted, her hands trembling as she typed. "Take 2, Jack replied, his voice sharp. "We don't have 5. Frank, still downstairs, heard the commotion through the radio. "Hang tight. I've got a distraction coming your way." Outside, Frank detonated charges he'd placed earlier, blowing up Griffin's supply trucks and creating a massive diversion. The explosions shook the facility, and the mercenaries hesitated, glancing toward the monitors showing the chaos outside. Jack seized the moment, taking out 2 guards with quick, precise shots. Move! As the firefight continued, Lila finally cracked the system, unlocking the doors and accessing Griffin's files. Her face paled as the data filled the screen. "Jack," she whispered, "it's worse than we thought. They're not just building an autonomous drone army. They've already sold the technology to foreign powers. Griffin's global. This is just one hub of many." Jack's fists clenched. "Then we take this one down and figure out the rest later. Upload the virus." Lila nodded, inserting a flash drive into the console. "This will disable their systems temporarily, but if we want to stop them for good, we'll need their central server." Fang, still pinned behind a console, laughed bitterly. "You'll never stop Griffin. Cut off one head, 2 more grow in its place." Jack leveled his gun at Fang. "Maybe, but you won't be here to see it." With the virus uploaded, the team fought their way back to the ground floor. The facility was in chaos, alarms blaring as drones fell from the sky and systems shut down. As they reached the exit, Fang reappeared, bloodied but defiant. He raised his gun, aiming at Lila. "No!" Jack roared, stepping in front of her. The shot rang out, and Jack staggered, blood blooming on his shoulder. Marcus took Fang down with a single shot, and the group dragged Jack to safety as the facility began to collapse. The team barely made it out as explosions ripped through the complex, leaving it a smoking ruin. Jack, injured but alive, sat in the back of a truck, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Lila handed him the flash drive. "We have their files, but this was just the beginning." Jack nodded, his face grim. "Then we keep fighting, until every last one of them is gone." In the distance, another Griffin facility lit up on Lila's screen, marked as Primary Node. The battle was far from over. As the dust settles and the team drives away from the burning Griffin facility, one thing becomes crystal clear. The fight isn't over. Jack and his team may have won the battle, but the war against Griffin Industries and their global network of corruption is just beginning. With the stolen files in hand and the knowledge of Griffin's true power, the stakes have never been higher. But what's next for Jack? Can his team dismantle a global conspiracy one facility at a time? Or will Griffin's resources and influence prove too powerful to overcome? And what about Fang? Was this really the end of his story, or does he have one more trick up his sleeve? If you're hooked and want to see what happens next, don't forget to like and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. What do you think Jack's team should do next? Should they go after the primary Griffin node or try to expose their operations to the world? And if you loved this story, share it with a friend who loves action-packed, edge-of-your-seat adventures. Your support helps us bring you more gripping content like this. Stay tuned, because the fight isn't over, and neither is Jack's story. See you in the next video.